Greg, why do you hate this woman so much? Did she kick your cat? It's a fair question. I see that. Believe it or not, I'm ambivalent toward Leslye. It's not her, really. It's me and my brain. I think I might have all 80 of those HD things. I was doing the first video, and I wanted some quotes from the showrunner to be a professional, and the things that I've read to you, were insane. And there were so many. Before long, I had dozens of quotes, videos bookmarked, thousands of words of notes. Most of them were just WTF typed over and over again. I got too deep, and here we are, and Mama didn't raise a quitter. Anyway, today we're wrapping it up with just 2 sections. The first demonstrates that this show genuinely was a therapy session, and Leslye has got to travel everywhere in a stretch limo or something so that there's room for all of her baggage. The second and final section is about her strange desire to make everything sexual and her odd proclivity for seeing sexual imagery in platonic objects. I'm not an expert in psychobabble, but I have a buddy who knows about this stuff, so please welcome Dr. Greg. For those of you doubting his qualifications, I would like to point out his sport coat with elbow patches. He also says smart stuff. Listen to this. Symbolically asserting our agency within the algorithmic ecosystem, we reinforce our contribution to the dialectic, transcend the viewer-creator duality into a shared digital synchronicity. That's why my professional opinion is always that you hit the like button.
Smartest guy I know!
Let's just start with the therapy. And there's so many quotes here that we could go through, but we're not, because honestly, it's a little depressing. Plus, the concentration of insanity in each one is so potent, we won't need to examine very many for you to get the point that this show is unapproachable for most of the audience because it's more trauma dumping than actual story. The show assumes that you will immediately make the connection between the Jedi and your father, who you despise, and also church, which you also despise. Let's not build up to an insane take, we'll hop right into one. One of the reasons the Collider interviews were so wild was that the interviewer was mirroring Leslie's every crazy thought. She begins by praising the scene where Sol is force-choked and says, quote, "My first thought was, he doesn't even give her the agency to make this choice herself because he's accepting his fate. It just adds so much insult to injury. You can't even let her get a satisfactory kill because you're like, it's okay. It's so good." This person should be on a list, right? He didn't let her get a satisfactory kill because he accepted his fate?
What is wrong with you?
Anyway, Leslye will now explain how Sol's fatherly behavior is sexist. You heard me. Quote, "We also knew that it was always going to be the betrayal of the father, and I knew we had to juxtapose Luke's forgiveness and Vader's redemption. We're like, this is a story about the Sith, so that's not going to happen." Sorry, I have to stop this for just a moment. It says a lot about Leslye that she frames Vader as redeemed. I know there's a lot of debate on this topic, but I think Vader's end should not be viewed as a redemption, but a decision to stop a cycle of violence and evil that he was a part of. Also, he was fueled by passionate rage at Palpatine. Still a very Sith action. But her description should make sense if you've been following how she describes Khmer and how vulnerable and tender he is, other than the murder spree. However, Leslye continues here. Quote, "You're absolutely right. There's this thing that's called benign sexism, and part of it is this paternal protectionism. It seems like this good thing, but like you said, there's this, I have to protect you from everything. I have to make sure you're okay. I have to tell you what track to get on, and then once you're on that track, I need to support you." It seems that this person has a very inverted view of normal parental behavior as evil. Most of my clients come in because they're lacking these things. Yeah, I thought support was what any parent is supposed to do. Like, I can understand how I have to tell you what track to get on could seem overbearing, but I have to protect you, make sure you're okay, and support you? At least 75% of what she just said is what so many people would kill for. Honestly, I know for a lot of you watching right now, you would take some overbearing telling you what track is right if it also came with protection, support, and making sure you're okay. Some people wouldn't even tolerate it. They would welcome it. Like, yes, please tell me the track because I'm lost harder than the plot that Disney used to have. All right, deep breath. We're not done with this line of thought. She keeps going. Quote, "Ultimately, what happens is, again, this is a father-daughter relationship, as women evolve in their lives and develop their own personalities separate from their fathers, at some point, they have to reject that protectionism." I'll be honest, I haven't seen the show, but it sounds as though this Sol character is very overbearing. So I think it would make sense that the Osha character would need to escape from that grip that she's under. Sorry, that's actually not correct. The show opens up with her apart from him, having been away for several years, and then when they do finally meet up, he's so guilt-ridden about some kind of past traumatic event that he's extremely gentle with her. He's afraid that she is going to reject him. Then these statements that you're reading don't seem to make a lot of sense. Are you pranking me? Is this another eggnog trampoline situation? No, that was fun, though. No, you're not wrong. It really doesn't make any sense. I don't know about you guys, but this is kind of making me a little sad, right? Like, it's crazy and darkly hilarious and shocking, but at this point, aren't you a little sad for this person? We've seen that Leslye thinks the world is out to get her because she likes women. She thinks the whole culture disregards women at all times. She thinks a dude showing manipulative behavior is being caring and vulnerable if he gets naked, and she thinks that fathers being protective of their daughters is sexist. What a miserable and exhausting life this sounds like. All right, what's the next quote? Oh God, this one isn't even done. Like, I'm supposed to be making jokes. Like, that's my whole thing. Is there a cutaway that we could do? Crap. Okay, usually that one's funny. It's not working. All right, look, I'm just going to read the whole thing, the rest of it. It's like a Band-Aid, right? Quote, again, I'm so proud of it. I have so many favorite moments in the show. I have like 100, and I'm happy to go through all of them right now. One of my favorite moments is when he says, I did everything because I love, and he's going to say, I love you. And not only is that a level of attachment that an unbalanced Jedi would have, he very clearly is losing it in the last half of the season, but that's also the justification for that kind of behavior between the father and the daughter. The daughter has to surpass him in some way. She cannot stay a little girl or an adolescent or young adult. She has to, at some point, say, I reject what you have told me I need to do to make you proud, to follow in your footsteps. She has to do that. I do think when he says, it's okay, I think you're right. He is imposing on her agency at that point. But I do think, in a weird way, she needed it. She needed his acceptance. Not his approval, but his acceptance of his fate, I think, is what gives her that energy to do the final fist clench. Well, it seems as though Leslye doesn't have the self-confidence to actually disagree with her father. So she's trying to destroy him or undermine him via the Jedi so that she can feel that his criticism was never valid to begin with. Yeah, that tracks with her views on morality. Just like with the ethics discussion last time, if you don't bring these attitudes with you, you can't understand this show. If you don't feel that you have to reject your parents and their sexist, controlling support and protection in order that you might grow as a person, then there's no way you're going to understand the hero's journey that Osha is on, where she murders her father figure to attain freedom and decides the Sith are really the good guys. These are not common ideas. But Leslye assumes that you already share them, so she didn't explain them in the show. This is the disconnect in The Acolyte. It paints things as good or bad, opposite to common knowledge, and does not explain why. Like, assume that there is a movie, okay, and one character is attracted to children, and he tries to touch one, right? And then he gets brutally beaten, and it's presented in a good light. The people beating him are suddenly getting high fives from Chris Hansen, who shows up. The mayor gives him a key to the city. Everything's in bright color. Chariots of Fire is playing. Clearly, it's a triumphant moment for mankind. Since pretty much everybody agrees child attraction is bad, we would need zero explanation that the characters were correct to beat the child molester near to death. On the other hand, if somebody made a story where a guy makes the bold decision to be free and countercultural and embrace his attraction to minors, and it was presented like a hero's journey where the guy topples the evil societal institutions preventing him from loving freely, you'd probably have a little trouble engaging with the story that simply assumes that this guy is doing the right thing, right? Please nod. Yes, you would have difficulty with that. While not as extreme, Leslye similarly assumed that you would see Sol doing dad stuff and instantly realize how sexist and wrong it is. That's why this show was always going to fail. I fail to sleep sometimes, one of the crappier parts by getting older. Look, I don't gotta tell you how important sleep is. Probably why you try a lot of stuff. Weighted mask, weighted blanket, separate blanket from your partner, special pillow, maybe even a bed frame that raises your head and feet. Okay, getting out of bed noises. Guys, I'm very excited to talk to you about Oslo Sleep Buds. Now, I know that some of the solution you guys have tried is sound of some kind, book, TV, podcast, white noise, and a lot of you have tried earbuds, but you can't find any small enough, and it's really hard to get to sleep when it's being jammed into your ear canal by your pillow. Real quick, zoom in on this. Look at this on my ear. Look how tiny this thing is. It is so slim, I don't even feel it when I'm laying on my side on the pillow. And I wear them in both ears. I don't have to pick a side, pick the non-pillow ear that gets the sound for the night. These things are Bluetooth, they're sound masking, and they're so comfortable you can sleep on your side, which alone should be enough to get people excited, but there's more. The Oslo app does the normal stuff like timers and alarms, but just like Santa Claus, it knows when you're asleep. So if you like to nod off to a book or a podcast, these can sense when you fall asleep and switch over to the sleep sounds of your choice for a set time or the rest of the night, because they last up to 10 hours. I used to do shift work. These things would have been amazing for sleeping when my entire house wanted to be awake. The really cool thing is that sleep sensing is going to be in the app soon, so you can track the quality of your sleep to see what works best for you. I appreciate Oslo partnering with me on this one. If you want to get the best sleep of your life, scan the QR code that's on your screen, or use the link down below, or use code GCR to get $10 off your pair of Oslo Sleep Buds. Hey, was that my office? Shh, don't worry about it. But Leslye isn't just upside down on what is commonly agreed to be right and wrong. Take her interpretation of Luke in the Cave of Dagobah in this Vulture interview. Quote, "The image of Luke slaying Vader in the Dagobah cave and then seeing his own face in the helmet really stuck with me from childhood. It was a talisman I would always touch, like, this is what it's all about. What if I'm the bad guy? Do I feel like the bad guy, but I'm not? Am I being villainized by the people I love most? Or is this thing already in me, and the otherness, the thing I'm afraid of, what I should embrace about myself?"
Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Now, hang on, I have seen those movies. Luke seeing his face under the black mask is an almost comically obvious reference to the Jungian shadow self that he's repressing and needs to harness in a productive way. Are you sure this isn't one of your elaborate pranks? No, I'm reading you actual quotes from a real person. Did we watch the same movie? Was she watching like an edited one that was missing some of the very obvious themes of that scene? Like maybe she saw a version where half of Obi-Wan's warnings before Luke leaves the planet are cut off because he's reaching for a... That's the only reasonable scenario. How do you watch these movies and come away thinking, you know, Luke's vision of himself under the Vader mask is a clear indication that he should embrace his dark side otherness? But that part isn't what we're really here for, it's how she continues. Quote, "I started out wanting to explore the sister relationship, then my father got very sick in the middle of developing this, and it turned into this father-daughter relationship. My dad died in September. As we move forward with the story, I got sucked into my own feelings about his illness and our history together. Kathleen said, George wrote about his father, you need to write about your sister, you need to write about your father. Luke felt betrayed by his father in the way that George didn't want to take over his father's hardware store. My father made so many promises to me, and I felt like I failed because I couldn't live up to those expectations. Of course, I'm going to lean toward the other side, the dark side, the otherness. That system has its own societal expectations, but I'm more comfortable there than when I was trying to live up to what you wanted from me. When you have the type of father Soul is, there's an inability to recognize that paternalism as insular. Osha has to destroy her father to keep moving. I don't know what it means, but for father-son relationships in Star Wars, there's reconciliation. For father-daughter, there isn't. Honestly, I'm jealous of her therapist. Job security for years. Okay, one step at a time. First, she mentions her otherness twice here. Recall her interview with Fantastic Frankie where she said,
I just didn't really see myself as other, and I think you don't until people other you.
If you've been following along, you can now clearly see this attitude of wanting to be countercultural to a made-up culture. She complains that them others her, but also talks about her otherness like it's a point of pride that she's happy to embrace. Just like that New York Times article from a previous video whose author wanted to be able to praise the show for its superficial qualities, while 2 sentences later denigrating the audience for criticizing it based on those same superficial qualities. You can also see in this quote that the show was always going to be a therapy session. First, it was going to be about her sister, but then her dad got sick and she made it about that. Also, please note, we have yet more confirmation that Kathleen Kennedy knew the direction she was going and encouraged it.
Use your aggressive feelings.
Let the hate flow through you.
Lastly, she dismisses paternalism as insular, which justifies why she needs to destroy that ignorant attitude in order to keep moving. She also slipped into a different voice there for a second. Did you notice that? I'm more comfortable on the dark side than when I was trying to live up to what you wanted from me. Yeah, see, Sol was a direct stand-in for her dad, so his motivations didn't make sense to anyone but Headland. Through Osha, we can see how much Leslye wanted her dad to approve of her, which she confused for love. She explains in the same interview that Luke forgave his father, but through the magic of subversion, Osha would not. She then explains, quote, "We knew that you would slowly understand, over the course of 8 episodes, that Osha had put so much faith into Sol and was hoping to receive the love she had received as a child. I know the Jedi wouldn't use the word love, but that's what she was seeking. She needed to say, it doesn't matter if you say, I love you, because I have been living in the shadow of this my whole life." I'm gonna be honest, I don't understand what she just said or what she really wants. I'm sorry. Same. Like, I want to make sense of this. It's just not possible. Leslye wants to be loved, but it also doesn't matter if she gets told that. Osha wanted the love she received as a child. She was dying to leave the planet and go with the Jedi. She was directionless. Her Zabrak mother favored her sister, and her other mother didn't guide her at all. She's got love confused with acceptance, and wanted acceptance from Sol/her father, but on her own terms. She doesn't want to stand in the shadow of anything, doesn't want to answer to anyone, doesn't want to conform to any standard but her own. And anyone who disagrees doesn't want her to exist, or doesn't love her, or hates her. She's admitted that everything in the show exists to get Osha to that sunset scene with Kamir looking strong. That was the whole point. This entire show is the sentence, "It's not a phase, Dad," stretched out to 4 hours. But her dad is a Jedi, and the Jedi represent the Christian church for her. So let's look at that. Continuing in the Vulture interview, Headland is asked about her upcoming play, Cult of Love. It's one of her 7 Deadly Sins plays, this one about pride, and features a devoutly Christian family whose 4 adult kids come back for the holidays. The parents are obstinate and won't accept the kids' alternative lifestyles or recognize any issues that they have or admit that they caused them by ignoring solutions in favor of prayer. In the Vulture interview, Leslye explains how a family and Christianity are like a cult. Quote, "Our director, Trip Coleman, and I were talking about how it's called Cult of Love because all cults have a dream, and the dream is really beautiful. Even Jim Jones started out trying to desegregate Indianapolis. This family in the play has this dream that they follow to the logical conclusion, which is that they never achieve it. I was raised Christian. Christianity is the ultimate dream. It's a beautiful concept that God becomes human in order to love you more. Then you look at what Christianity has done to the world, colonization, genocide. It was a beautiful dream that doesn't justify the human actions that come along. The Jedi also live in a dream they believe everybody has. In The Acolyte, the pilot ends with the line, "An Acolyte kills the dream." The drama is to wake up to the fact that the dream doesn't exist. I got nothing. This is what I keep repeating. There is clearly an audience for this, albeit small. When it was playing at Berkeley earlier this year, one review described it as delving into the multifarious dysfunctions of a Jesus freak clan. If you read that and you thought, haha, yeah, stick it to those Jesus freaks, well, then the play sounds like it might be for you. If you don't need the catharsis of a play telling you that cutting off your family was right all along because they totally suck, then you might not love this one. If you don't hate religion and Christianity specifically, like not just agnostic or dismissive or ambivalent, but would describe them as genocidal colonizers, indeed bringing genocide and colonization to the world, then you're going to have a tough time engaging with any of Headland's work. The Star Wars audience, by and large, is not going to get Headland's point of view. In the next quote, we'll see how one interviewer is exactly the type of audience the Acolyte was for, but this one really demonstrates why the show feels so unapproachable. We aren't speaking the same language. Like, I'm not even offended. I can't be offended because, well, first, she's just describing people in general, and also, she's in full agreement with Jesus and Paul. Jesus said that people who pray loudly and live piously just to be seen are hypocrites, and they're getting the only reward they'll ever get. Paul said people like that are why God is blasphemed among non-believers. That was Romans 2:24. He also said there's no reason to be proud because All y'all suck, is I think how the Message translation puts Romans 3:11 through 18. So she's not wrong about the pride bit. Going to church should be like going to an AA meeting, but most of the audience is A, not this angry at Christianity, and B, definitely does not equate it with the Jedi. We also see the same issue here with how she presents the problems of the Jedi organization, in that she doesn't present problems with the philosophy, just some people involved. That might make for a fine drama, but it says very little about the ideas themselves, which she claims to be doing. This final quote ties together her conflation of the Jedi and Christianity and how she wanted to subvert both, just because. We start with the interviewer affirming that the show was made for people like her. In the final episode, when Senator Raincourt is accusing the Jedi of being a too powerful religion, the interviewer said, quote, "Everything he says in that scene is everything I feel about the Jedi," and asks if he was supposed to be a stand-in for what the audience is supposed to be thinking here. It really takes a certain type of person to bring these attitudes to the show and think, yes, exactly, when hearing this senator's extremely obvious speech. But Leslye affirms that this was the point. Quote, "Absolutely. Absolutely. He sums it up so succinctly, and his performance is so immaculate that I think it's very clear that this is not a blanket Jedi are the bad guys. It's saying, I think that you have too much power. I'm not saying you guys are bad guys. I'm saying you have too much power, and it's something that no one is looking into right now. So yes, I have a vendetta against you." Whoa. Nobody's accusing. No, I'm not saying you guys are bad. Just saying that you're way too powerful and I'm going to go on a single-minded mission to make sure there's an investigation of you. I'm not saying you guys are the bad guy. Nobody's insinuating anything here. She then explains yet another reference, this time GoldenEye, where the brand new M, Judi Dench, tells the new Bond, Pierce Brosnan, that he is a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. And he believes that she is an accountant, a bean counter more interested in her numbers than his instincts. Leslye feels that it was meant to bring him down a peg because MI6 isn't as impressed with his reputation as the audience might be. Then she equates this Bond to the Jedi to explain how the protagonists rely on their good reputation and assume they are always right, to which the interviewer responds, "Hero worship is a hell of a drug." Okay, real quick, I want to point out Leslie's continuous habit of false equivalencies, where she assigns a label to two things and then pretends that they share more than that. Khmer is countercultural, just like the rebels. Therefore, he is good and the Jedi are bad, like the Empire. She insinuates that the Jedi are corrupt and then says Dave Filoni would agree that they are fallible. So, see, both our critiques are valid because they are in the same sentence. Bond was a protagonist and a relic of the Cold War, as M put it, and the Jedi are also protagonists, so we can assume they also have outdated methods and too high an opinion of themselves. Critical theory tells us institutions are bad and too powerful, and since we can call Christianity and Jedi institutions, they both also are bad, and they're basically the same as each other. She does this constantly. Also, that scene in GoldenEye was masterful and was much deeper than simply, "You better earn my respect, 007, you're not as cool as you think." It was establishing two brand new personalities, contrasting their approach to espionage and demonstrating the complexity of that tension, but also mutual respect. It was fantastically written and acted. How does she keep taking the most incorrect themes from all of these famous movies? Finally, the interviewer said she, quote, "appreciated the fact that he is like, you think you're a religion, and she's so quick to be like, we're not a religion. But I've always viewed the Jedi as a religion, and then, as I've evolved from my childhood to now, the deconstruction of the Jedi has fit so perfectly into the deconstruction of religion as well. So this scene was truly the moment of everything I've been waiting for someone to call the Jedi out on." Oh dear, this isn't about the Jedi at all. Yep, this is the only way that you can get the show, if you are bringing the same type of baggage as Leslye. But she responds, quote, "I'm so glad you feel that way. I'm so proud of it. I feel like we accomplished it. That scene was obviously cooking in my brain for a long time, figuring out how to really succinctly put the concern around the Jedi, but also how the Jedi are going to slowly get sucked into having to acquiesce to political issues. Because again, to protect the Jedi, she's going to have to play both sides, and that's what ends up happening." There you go. Raincourt is yet another self-insert of Leslie's worldview. She is the villain, the protagonist, various side characters. She is the show. You know, it really seemed like a plot hole to me that the cover-up Vernestra comes up with makes the Jedi look terrible in exactly the way the senator said that they would. But now I see it wasn't a plot hole. Headland never wanted to resolve the mystery. She wants the Jedi to look bad and the Senator's prediction to come to pass. She wants them to look incompetent and untrustworthy because that is how she views organized religion. The last sentence undermines her goal, however, and here I'm kind of seeing a little bit of a problem with taking Headland too seriously. She speaks out of both sides of her mouth. If the Jedi are getting sucked into politics and that's what really causes their downfall, then they weren't bad, right? It was the Senate, politicians like Rayencourt, who were the bad guy, the selfish ones. They were the ones with too much power, right? Do you see how she just can't keep a straight story? You can see from Leslie's statements and the affirmation from Maggie Lovett over at Collider that this project was a big therapy session to defame all of Leslie's personal villains. Her dad, her sister, George Lucas, men in general, the Jedi, and Christians. Unless you also hate these things, the show is going to feel alien to you. It's not even a question of relatability, it's a question of understandability. The story will seem strange and disconnected to anyone, unlike Collider's Maggie Lovett, who has been waiting for the Jedi to get called out for their religious ways. There is one possible other audience for the Acolyte, and that would be book talk folks who don't read books, they just read the dialogue, or they go for titles with extra spiciness. Dr. Greg, are you ready to talk about how lightsabers are actually penises and how seeing a nude person will make you change all of your moral positions? No, I think I've had quite enough of this. I'm going to be honest, I don't think any of this is healthy for you either. You're not wrong. I had to take a break, go change my shirt and everything, but I did all the research and I'm committed and I'm almost done now. So, before you go, is going down this rabbit hole like a symptom in your professional opinion? Am I, neurospicy? Sorry, I was looking something up. My steno book is Greg ruled, which I thought was kind of fun. But then my notebook is college ruled. So I was wondering if there were other types. And it turns out other countries have their own. The French have this Sayez rule, which has a bunch of vertical lines, which looks pretty handy. And then Germany, in a classic German move, they don't have names. It's just codes, right? Like, the notebooks will be to standard 16552, section 1977-04. Germany. Oh, no. Dad, Greg, what are you doing? I'm just making sure that I got the gems right, because people usually say go crit damage, and I could add 96% currently, which is quite a bit, but it's only proccing 7% of the time. Could be 19 if I'm over 80% health. But the thing is, this build with the Nova, Rathma, Decrepify combo is making the overpowers happen constantly. And right now I'm doing like 1,000% bonus damage. And I think if I'm doing the calculations right, it's like 10x every time Nova overpowers. Oh, biscuits. Well, let's talk about that odd sexual energy here and how it derails the show. Star Wars is rarely involved overt sex, and when it has alluded to it, it's for narrative reasons. Like Slave Leia emphasizes Jabba's oppression and depravity, and it leads to Leia, the leader of the Resistance, literally using her chains to break free of that oppression. As we discussed in the last video, Anakin having sex with Padme is one of the many hints that he is forming attachments that will be exploited by Palpatine. However, Leslie's style of sexual imagery is the more common modern variety where it just gets tossed in for flash and destroys the pacing while adding nothing narratively or thematically. She also sees sexual imagery where most of us don't, like phallic lightsabers, deepening the chasm between her show and the audience's ability to engage with it. In this interview, that Collider author Maggie is praising the final episode for showing a bleeding kyber crystal, to which Leslye responds, quote, "This was my dream." Again, we talked very early on in the writer's room about bleeding a lightsaber because, to me, it's a very intimate thing. In a weird way, it's an earned thing. I talked to Pablo Hidalgo a lot. The crystal has to be exposed. She can't Hulk out and do it. We've seen it in Fallen Order, and the crystal comes right out. But we knew this is a moment. We don't have time. It would be too premeditated. It has to happen in that moment. The kyber crystal thing does sound cool, actually, but even she knew they didn't have the time, and then they tossed it in as a spontaneous occurrence. It's never mentioned in the show, and it feels like it comes out of nowhere. This is what happens when you can't kill your darlings. However, she then describes the very obvious symbolism of the lightsaber, I guess. Quote, "Without getting too explicit, James Friend, who was the DP of that episode, when he shot looking into the lightsaber, we've always seen the lightsaber as a Phallic symbol, the interviewer says helpfully. Headland responds, exactly, you said it, not me. To look inside it, to look down it, to see its... The interviewer says, it's so great too, because that is something that was discussed around The Last Jedi as well. There were a lot of people who talked about the moist cave and all this self-discovery for Rey inside. There's a lot of imagery that is just inherently baked into filmmaking for both genders, and the way that it can be expressed in different forms of the yin and the yang, basically. This is brain rot right here. This is chronic online syndrome. Lightsabers and swords are not phallic symbols, they're efficient weapons. The people who like to revise history and portray sword fights as queer-coded need to go get a hobby. Just like anyone who thinks Rey going into a moist cave of self-discovery is an allusion to her vagina. Leslye, Maggie, the director of photography, James Friend, they all think that it's super deep to look into the bloody urethra of a lightsaber. Very highbrow. You know, the bleeding penis saber sure does add some weird layers to this poster for the show, right? Kinda icky now, isn't it? Sometimes TDY will do that to a lightsaber. But Leslye wanted to make sure that you really got it. And she explains, quote, exactly. And to see this change and to see that it's coming directly from... I mean, even when we were doing VFX, I was like, put veins in her hand. I want this to be so visceral. I just think it's so personal and intimate for her to bleed the lightsaber that way.
It's so veiny.
That's a veiny wang shaking in her grip. I'm not making this up. The showrunner wanted it that way. But whose dong is she holding? Why, her father's, of course. The very same penis saber he used on her mother. This is bafflingly strange. The interviewer tells her, quote, there's so much beauty to it too, because this is the weapon that killed her mother, and she's now reclaiming it as her own and creating something completely new. There are so many layers to the visuals of that. Headland responds, absolutely. Again, it comes down to the betrayal and the rejection of the father, the opposite of Luke and Vader. That's the idea. It's pretty simple. It's something that I was hoping would subconsciously or by osmosis, because the first time she holds that saber, she's a young girl. He's gifting her with this idea. He's gifting her with this dream. And you're exactly right. That dream is also the thing that destroys her world when you're a child. It's also used for that. Then it becomes her own. She takes it from him and claims it as her own. I just couldn't resist making that 3-act structure of it. I'm so proud of it. I wanted it to feel like the lightsaber had its own journey over the course of the season. So, it's a veiny schlong, and we look down its cracked urethra. It symbolizes taking the power in the situation, which has ironically misogynistic implications. But her father also offers it to her as a child, so then it's a dream. And she defeats her father and takes his penis dream for herself. I was gonna make a lot more jokes with, like, penis puns, but this is real gross. Before we leave this weird line of thought, note that here is one more darling that she couldn't kill. Saber needs its own 3-act structure. It's just another half-baked, highbrow idea shoehorned into this bloated script. Later in the interview, they're discussing Osha and Kamir holding each other's hands and the saber, two-handing it, if you will. There, see, the jokes aren't as vomit-inducing when we're talking about two adults. The interviewer says that shot definitely had some euphemisms, some allusions, and Leslye affirms, quote, this is the other reason I love Manny. Some of episode 5, but almost every line in episode 6 is a sexual innuendo, and he just does it in this way that doesn't feel corny or cheesy. Later, everybody knows that that's what it is, but there's no winking about it. That's what I thought he did so well.
Wow, a grown man complaining about Star Wars. It's frickin' Star Wars, it's for kids. What are you whining about?
I'll repeat, some of episode 5, but almost every line in episode 6 is a sexual innuendo. Enjoy, kids! But wait, she's not done. Quote, both Amandla and Manny, when they read the final draft of episode 6, they were both looking at me like, Leslye, just shaking their heads and being like, all right, here we go. But I loved it. I loved playing around with that. I've felt a lot of love for my friends, this sexuality, and what they're both playing is so exciting. Star Wars was really sexy to me. The interviewer exclaims, always has been. And Headland responds, it's sexy. I don't know why, but it is. And I do think a lot of the imagery, it's like, oh my God, but it's true. It's phallic. There's a lot of really incredible pieces of imagery that I think is very subliminal. I think it just sinks into you. Selfishly, this is kind of making my job hard. Like, what do I say after that, right? You just there it is. That's what she said. I can't add to that. She also mentions Han and Leia, and the interviewer calls them an OTP, which I had to look up, which made liver spots instantly appear on my hands. It means one true pairing, and apparently that refers to somebody's favorite fictional romance. This show really should have stayed on Wattpad. This interviewer was gushing about how great it was to ship Osha and Kamir, and wondered if they were inspired by any other enemies to lovers ships. Leslye responds, quote, "There are so many, but I'm going to say no because I was really working from muscle memory. I didn't want it to quote something else." Hat, she is hatting. Every other quote is her talking about these references that she's making. What? Sorry, she continues. "I wanted to just click into the kind of stuff that I wrote when I was in high school. I love these characters. Nobody wants to ship these characters more than I do. I love them so much." Yeah, this writing is literally sophomoric. But this navel-gazing conversation isn't over. The interviewer later states, quote, "Speaking about costumes and symbolism, I love how this ship plays with gender norms. You have this flowy outfit that Kamir has on, and Osha is a mech. I see people starting to pick up on that a little because he's so femme-coded, and his clothes, and the fact that he's cooking for her, and he's very soft-spoken. And then you have her wearing the pants and being like, 'I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna shank you.'" With Headland responding, "It's so wildly intentional that I don't know what to say." That is a hakama. It's very Eastern. It's meant to evoke samurai imagery because the Jedi are very samurai-esque. It's not deep. This isn't hidden. There's just only so far that you can stretch an interpretation until you're simply making things up. This clothing is not femme-coded. The Jedi are not the Vatican. Swords are not wieners. And cooking soup and lowering your voice doesn't negate several murders. But now that we know the scene was wildly intentional, makes this camera angle kind of weird, huh? That's an odd pose for any human to be in, but it's so it can look like she's holding her very own erect penis. You're not convinced it's a penis? Here's Kamir's next line.
"Feels good, doesn't it? To hold one in your hand again."
Almost every line in episode 6 is a sexual innuendo. Osha misses holding a penis dream. This phallic object of great power is what makes her strong. Later, she will tightly grip her father's as she takes his life. Guys, this is just, it's so weird. I'm not sure where this belongs, but it sure doesn't fit in the Star Wars universe. Not in the cinematic one, anyway. Maybe some weird stuff happens in the extended universe. I'm told that the reins were held rather loosely there. But the Disney company wanted to explore a new Star Wars time period for the first time on screen, and they handed it to a person who injected sexual imagery and family baggage, and the head of Lucasfilm told her to dig deep and really make it her own. Leslye heard that loud and clear and decided to add something she felt Star Wars was lacking: explicitly sensual characters pursuing physical intimacy. While discussing the younger and female audiences the show might appeal to, Leslye explained, quote, "Because something like Marvel is a brilliant 4-quadrant initiative, women continue to be fans of those things. But with the Acolyte, they could be like, hold on a second, this feels specifically for me. The MCU is full of gym rats with incredible bodies, but none of them are sensual or actively pursuing physical intimacy with another character, female or not. That's what makes The Stranger different. Manny's character is explicitly sensual. This is a bit of wish fulfillment for me in the fan fiction of my girlhood, but I'd argue part of my fandom is that. I'm not saying that we should all just be Puritans and never, ever talk about sex, pretend like it doesn't exist. Plays a big part in life. A lot of history is about doing it. However, not everything needs to be about sex. In fact, I would argue that sex almost never advances a story. Behaviors leading up to sex? Yes. Attitudes after sex? Yes. Other characters' attitudes toward the sex havers? Yes. But actually stopping to do it is a complete pace killer. Also, a character whose sole motivation is doing it is flat. The characters in the MCU aren't sensual or pursuing physical intimacy because the story has no need for that. Superheroes are about virtue and overcoming challenges and teamwork and whatnot. They don't need to be boning, and it's so odd that she wants to insert this. Not everything needs to be sexed up. I like Legos, but it would be really weird if I was in the Lego aisle shouting, "This is so basic." Why doesn't Lego make a set that is shaped just like a that you can take and right in the Technics needs to get on this. Likewise, Star Wars is a space opera about big concepts, and it has existed for a while, so jamming in sudden sensuality feels off. It doesn't add to the narrative. There's a difference between wanting to see beautiful people on screen and wanting to see them actually take a bang break. The audience enjoys physically attractive people. There's no doubt about that, so Manny and Manny's forearms definitely didn't hurt viewership with women. Marvel knew it, which is why Hemsworth and Evans were shirtless or wearing a shirt 2 sizes too small. A lot. Male audiences are the same, and they've liked beauty in Star Wars for a while. Especially Twi'leks, I'm seeing. Like, I don't know what it is about fantasy creatures with stuff coming out of their skulls. Twi'leks, tieflings, Argonian maids, e-girls with cat ears. Some guys just cannot get enough of this stuff. Guys, we made it. We scoured the grimy depths of Leslie's psyche and came back only slightly worse for it. Over the course of 4 videos, we've looked at the technical failings of the Acolyte and Leslie's narcissism, sexism, refusal to manage, warped moral views, personal baggage, and need to add sexual imagery to everything. At this point, you could probably see why the Acolyte failed. But this should also give you a good idea as to why the entire Star Wars brand is falling apart. Nobody is shepherding this IP. There is no quality control. The fact that this story was greenlit, hundreds of people worked on it, and it made it all the way on Disney Plus is a massive indictment, not just of Lucasfilm, but also of Disney in general. The Acolyte didn't just fail because of Leslie's bizarre worldview. It failed because Disney let it. Until someone at Lucasfilm cares about Star Wars again, we're going to keep getting therapy sessions and veiny lightsabers instead of actual stories. I appreciate you sticking with me in these videos. Your time has value, and I'm grateful that you spent it here with me. If this happens to be your first video, then this box is going to take you to part 1, that's about the show, and then this one will be the start of the Leslye saga. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. I am Groot.